Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast.
Welcome to Plates and Pancakes. We're sitting down today with Bill Parisi. Coach Parisi is the founder and CEO of Parisi Speed School. He is an internationally recognized expert in youth speed training. Parisi attended Iona College, where he was a two-time NCAA Division I All-American javelin thrower and qualified for the Olympic trials. Parisi took a position as a graduate assistant with the University of Florida Strength and Conditioning Department. And after 1 year at the University of Florida, Coach Parisi began his career as an in-home personal trainer, operating out of a home office in his parents' house. Here at Parisi Speed School, got its start through humble beginnings. It has evolved into the biggest training franchise in the world, partnering with some of the biggest names in the strength and conditioning industry. So welcome to the show, Coach.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Steve. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Well, I'm glad. I was looking through some speed books and trying to figure out what I wanted to add to my library, and I found your Anatomy of Speed. And just a great book. How long did it take to put that thing together?
Yeah, that was probably like a 30-year project, but really putting it on paper was a couple of years effort with not just me, but a huge collaboration of many coaches over the years, and just a lot of trial and error and experience, and a great team. Just to have a great team that I've assembled, and we put great content out. Got a colleague of mine, Jonathan Allen, who's helped me with a lot of the gathering the content. So yeah, no, it was a while. So I would say a couple of years, but really 30 years of experience.
Well, the citations in it alone had to have taken somebody an incredible amount of time that you went through, and you backed all that information up. That was amazing. Yeah.
No, it was well put together. And, the thing about the industry, there's a lot of science now that's helping to validate, the information that we thought was true for a while. And typically coaching tends to lead, the forefront, and then science, catches up to it to validate it. In some ways, and then in other ways, science leads the way. But it's a very interesting, world we live in right now, because science is accelerating, technology is accelerating, and we're learning so much so fast. There's still so much more we don't know compared to what we do know in terms of the body, and now the evolution of connective tissue and understanding how that works within our system. And so, yeah, no, we felt there was a need for a manuscript like the Anatomy of Speed that kind of puts it together in one book and addresses a lot of the fundamentals of field and court sport, athleticism, and movement. Movement literacy, we like to reference, or motor vocabulary. So, we feel that's a manuscript a coach could take a look at, a sport coach, even a parent. It goes deep in some areas, there's no doubt. But with the simple drill applications and what we do, putting it together with the workouts, we keep it still, I think, grounded in fundamentals.
Yeah, I mean, I had a good time reading it. I took a ton of notes. I've got it all highlighted up for my first time through. So the information you put in there was incredible. But the one thing that it always ties back to is fascia. So more and more coaches are catching on to this. What put you on the fascia track?
Yeah, interesting. I've been someone that I'm always learning. I'm a constant learner. I've got I'm blessed with a tremendous network of coaches, and what afforded me that network, I was asked to help the NFL strength coaches about 14 years ago organize their annual banquet and, their continued education. And I've put that together for the NFL guys over the last 14 years, and organizing with Gatorade and the NSCA their education. It afforded me a lot of opportunity to meet many different top sports scientists around the world. But at the same time, I knew a lot of these guys already from just years and years ago. So someone like Dan Path is a well-known speed expert. He's coached multiple Olympians, dozens of world-renowned track and field athletes. He's actually had 3 individuals run sub 10:0 who didn't lower body weight train. He's done a lot of different things. So I would say Dan really kind of was talking about fascia for a long time. He was one of the innovators of ART back in the early 2000s, late 90s. And then I started to really read up on it and then go all in about 7-8 years ago, and just did a ton of reading, and then, just was able to network and then build relationships to a point where I was on the board of directors of the Fascia Research Society for a number of years. I was the treasurer for that organization. I networked with the top scientists from around the world, people like Robert Schleip, a top German, well-published scientist on fascia and connective tissue, and Mark Driscoll, and a whole bunch of others, Tom Myers. I'm actually put together a webinar with Tom Myers and Stuart McGill coming out next Saturday, or next Sunday. We're doing a webinar on fascia and performance with those two. So I've organized that, and just kind of working and networking with these great minds, these great researchers, great practitioners. Like Tom Myers is a practitioner, he's not a researcher. Dan Path is a great practitioner. Robert Schleip is a researcher. Keith Barr is a top researcher on tendon health at UC Davis. Went and spent time with Keith Barr. So my thing has been find the best in the world in terms of what they do, and if it's things I'm interested in fascia, I go out and I visit with them. I organize. So I'm blessed to have a network, and these people are always welcoming me to come and meet with them and spend time with them, and that's what I've done. I went out and saw Dan for a week. Personally, brought my two sons out, and spent some time sharing best practices, and I've done that with a lot of different people. I've met up with Franz Bosch for a while, went to his event and got to know him, and did some stuff with Franz. Cal Dietz, out in Minnesota, spent time with Cal, and just going out there and spending a few days with people one-on-one is what I've been doing for 30 years. So it's all started for me going to Finland. I went to Finland in 1989 for a summer, and I trained and worked out and actually competed with Tapios Kouros, who won the gold medal in 1988 in the Olympics in the javelin throw, and worked with his coaches. So that's where it all kind of started. As an undergraduate athlete, I put a fundraiser together. I went to Finland, and I learned all these great functional training movements and exercises. And that passion to go out and seek and go out and get in front of people started 30 years ago. It's never stopped.
It wasn't very long ago I had Cal Dietz on and was able to talk to him, and reading your book and reading some of what he says. Yeah, you can definitely tell that you guys think a lot alike. So
we do. I mean, there's some things that might contradict, his whole, core strength, core stiffness. He's not a big fan of that. He's mainly, he all comes from the glute, from Cal's perspective. I think he has a lot of valid points with that concept. And I think, your core gets trained. I think, automatically in a lot of ways. That's true. I get that when you squat heavy, all these different things. I do agree, but I'm a big believer in understanding mechanical composites and co-contractions and knowing how to facilitate or pulse stiffness, pulsing stiffness, which I'm really unpacking and training a lot more. I mean, even from when the book came out, we finished the book a couple of years ago, but now even with our warm-up progressions, we're doing some things because, just meeting with Cal and meeting with all these different people, Franz Bosch, and self-organization and the constraints-led approach, and the damn path, and all these guys don't all see eye to eye, which is really interesting. It's kind of funny, right? All these great minds don't always see eye to eye. There's little nuances they all have, and I like to look at myself as I kind of take what I think is the best and what's really concrete from a lot of these guys. I synthesize it and I put it together and create a simple system that I can teach coaches to go duplicate it. That's the magic. I think a lot of people in this industry, if you're working at a university and you got your athletes, that's one thing. But if you're working in a private practice, the goal as a coach, you want to be able to scale and duplicate and be able to get quality results and be able to bring coaches along. And I feel that's a never-ending process, and that's what I think we do pretty well, in terms of using really strong sound science, but being able to get coaches ramped up to deliver great training for athletes to be injury resilient in field and court sports. That's the most important thing, building that resiliency, and then ultimately enhancing performance. But yeah, that's that's kind of what I focus on.
I would think that through your differences is how we're evolving the sport, as opposed to how much you agree. If there's never any difference, there's no reason to look any further than the surface. So by having people around you and you always questioning what's out there, finding a different opinion, I think you've probably been able to advance further than if you just went along with the flow.
There's no doubt about that. Everything, being challenged and making you think through things is great. And I think, Cal has a strong opinion on his things, and Dan Path has a strong opinion. Franz Bosch has a very strong opinion on a lot of his things. And, when you go down the list of all these great minds, you got to pick and choose, in terms of, what I think it comes down to the athlete. You kind of look at the athlete, and these guys are, there's different bone structures, there's different, anatomical drivers that really drive the athleticism, and then ultimately finding what's right for that athlete. So, there's a lot to think about, and sometimes you can get paralysis by analysis, and you can kind of go, you get so deep, and then that gets tough too. You kind of freeze, and I've been through it all, right? My go-to is fundamentals, consistency, and really recovery, and mastering the recovery process, and really understanding what a lot of eccentric loading does in the sagittal plane. I think we're overdoing it as an industry. I think we've overcooked the sagittal plane eccentric loading. These kids are eccentrically loading in the sagittal plane since 13, 14 years old, a lot of these kids. And as you get to that, 18, 19, 20, 22, 23, if that's still the main thing, that's limiting a lot of athletes' performance, and I believe it's causing injury.
Okay, so if that bucket's kind of full, where are you looking at maybe concentrating next?
Yeah, no, to me, it's funny because we have the Parisi Academy. We have 24 full-time 8th grade students at our home base in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. So full-time. So they come to school with us 8:30 to 2:30 every single day. We train them 4 days a week. They're all right at that 13, 14, 15 age group. Most of them are reclassing 8th grade. They're young enough to do 8th grade again, so they go into high school. They're going to be much better off to succeed. And I started the program because of my son. He was a little younger, and it worked out. 2 of my sons reclassed the 8th grade. My older son did it, and he's playing now college basketball. He went to Don Bosco. My younger son, he did it. And again, they're both 5'10". We don't have great genetics. I played offensive line in high school and linebackers, so we don't have great genetics. But now my older guy is playing receiver at the University of Delaware. He's a freshman, and that 8th grade class year that we reclassed was really important. The training we did was really important. So the point I'm making is that we have these kids 4 days a week. I just did a workout with them today. I train them a couple days a week, my guys. And a big part of what we do is omnidirectional submaximal loading, quote unquote, fascia related stuff. So we use different tools like Vipers and med balls and different loading modalities to really stress the system in odd positions. If you had 2 wrestlers, the same exact weight and same aptitude in terms of skill, in terms of wrestling technique, but one kid grew up on the farm and the other kid grew up in the city and was in the weight room his whole life, you're probably going to bet on the farm boy, because that farm boy did a lot of omnidirectional loading, submaximal loading, and he was putting stress on his muscles at length. When you put stress on muscles at length, because typically your traditional barbell lifting, you're shortening a muscle. Muscles are typically shortening when you're loading. But when you're putting muscles at length away from the center of mass, it causes, this mechanical transduction, if you will, where we're signaling the body to lay down more collagen. So collagen synthesis is really important. And that's where I'm living right now. We still sagittal plane load. We still, with these kids, we're still obviously getting them strong, doing traditional lift, squat, dead. We're doing those things, but it's in conjunction with these types of movements that's going to really build that inner wetsuit, right? So when a power lifter goes and performs a bench press competition, typically when he's in the competition, when you're allowed to use, the aids, he puts on a super tight, like rubber shirt, right? It takes 3 people to put it on. he's getting free energy from that shirt. Well, you can train your body to have, create that type of shirt around all your joint systems. And that's connective tissue. Specifically, it's, the endo, epi, perimyocin, and the superficial fascia, the deep fascia. All this collagen is, for the most part, type 1 collagen, the same type of collagen, for the most part, a good percentage of it. Then you have elastin and some other, many forms of collagen, but the majority of it is triggered through movements and the loading parameters and directions of loading, or the lack of loading or the lack of movement. And that's when this collagen becomes like cement. And you see people with poor posture, or, they have an external rotated hip because they're sitting, with the hip rotated externally all the time. And the body starts to lay down this collagen matrix in a way where it locks up your joint. That's why we don't put patients in casts anymore, because, we get this fibrosis, this development of this cement, if you will, of the fascia, and your fascia starts to become like, peanut butter, and then cold peanut butter, and then it's like frozen peanut butter, right? We need that system to be like syrup, and when we're competing, more like hot syrup. So that's the analogy, and really getting this viscoelastic system, which really is very adaptable to the environment, to the stresses. It's new cutting edge. It's a new frontier. I'm kind of so dialed into it, not kind of, but I am really dialed into to this form of training. And this is a new system. This is a newly discovered organ. It has 8 to 10 times more the proprioceptors in muscle. It's something that is really important for every coach, every trainer, every therapist to really understand. And the science is there. It's non-negotiable now. The science of addressing this system and how to address it is there, and it's huge implications for speed development and injury resiliency.
Well, let me take that in a little bit different of a path, because I've heard you talk about this before, and it brought up some questions I had. We're seeing a more sedentary lifestyle from the top down, not only the kids, but the adults. So now when you go somewhere, you see people, older adults, really struggling to get around.
Oh, yeah.
And is that related to watching that turn into peanut butter as opposed to syrup? And how can we head that off as we age?
100%. 100%. The aging process. So your fascia is, majority of your fascia is water and collagen. The extracellular matrix is mainly, water, collagen, and obviously there's different cells, fibroblast cells, fasciocytes, about 10% roughly are cells. And as we age, we become more dehydrated. And when you have less water in your system, just like your skin, right? It gets wrinkly. It doesn't have the bounce back to it. And the same thing with your connective tissues. And the way to keep it healthy is movement. Like once you stop moving, this connective tissue, this fascia hardens. It dehydrates, and it becomes fibrotic. And I've had the good fortunes to work with a lot of different therapists that are really dialed into this. There's one therapist, Eric Owens, out of Chicago, who's really dialed in. His story is very unique. He has a company called Delos Therapy. His dad is an engineer by trade, and this was back in the 80s. Had a frozen shoulder, and there wasn't any therapist that could help him. Like his shoulder was just in pain. He couldn't move it. He went to one therapist to the next, couldn't figure it out. So he went to massage therapy school, really did a deep dive in anatomy and biomechanics, and wind up through manual manipulation on himself, fixed his own shoulder. He was so ahead of the game in understanding this extracellular matrix of fascia that he quit his job as an engineer and started doing massage therapy. And in the 90s, there was a front page article in the Houston Chronicle, how he fixed Warren Moon's shoulder, how he worked on Carl Lewis, Evander Holyfield, among others. This was 1990s. Eric now is in his 40s. He was a young kid at the time, and is completely dialed into this. And I had the good fortunes to introduce Eric to some of the top fascia scientists, Robert Schleip, for one, out of Germany, who's one of the leaders in fascia research. And Eric wound up going to Germany a number of times to share his methods with these top scientists. Jan Wilke is one as well. Jan has done a lot of research. One study I'll cite here in a second. But where I'm going with this, and I'm going to give your audience a real good nugget here, what Eric has unpacked is that a lot of pain or a lack of motion, we know is within the fascia, within the connective tissue. There's challenges in the collagenous network. Jan Winke did a meta-analysis a few years ago in this study, and he showed that 87% of all soft tissue injuries is within the collagenous tissue, not just muscle, but it's in this collagenous connective tissue, because muscle without fascia is chop meat, right? I mean, when you think of the cell's a water balloon, and everything inside that water balloon is the nucleus and mitochondria and all the elements of that cell. The water balloon is the fascia, and that's your endomyosin, right? And then you have, a million water balloons and another really big water balloon, and that big water balloon that's holding a million water balloons is called the perimyosin. This is non-negotiable. We know this. It's the connective tissue that wraps all these other cells. And then you got the epi that wraps the entire muscle. Then you got superficial fascia, deep fascia that wraps groups of muscle, so on and so forth. So the world of fascia has been around, unpacking or releasing that superficial fascia, the gliding of one muscle on top of the other. It gets stuck, and you have this limited range of motion because the muscles can't glide on top of one another. And you're working that technique. What Eric has discovered, that his belief, and he's gaining traction, is the perimyosin becomes fibrotic, and just like putting superficial or lateral forces through the muscle is not good enough. You have to put deep, vertical forces in the muscle at different angles, and doing it in an oscillating way. So it's oscillating angular pressure to break up the fibrosis of specifically the perimyosin. And this is really started with his dad, and he's got like 6 massage therapy clinics in Chicago thriving, and they're massage therapy, but they're really pain clinics. And it's just like the results are just insane, because a lot of the issues in athletes, I'm not saying ART, all those techniques, they all have their place, stucco techniques. And, the fascia does get stuck when muscles are laying on top of one another in that superficial layer, or it's not, you're not gliding, the muscles aren't gliding, but deeper within the cell body, the cell bellies, right? If you understand what I'm saying from the perimyosin standpoint, that water balloon that's holding a million cells, the epi is the layer of fascia that surrounds the entire muscle. Then you have your fascial lines, the superficial back line, your superficial front line, your spiral line, your lateral line, all these different lines. The back line has been proven by science. The other lines technically aren't, they're not a hard science yet, but Tom Morris has a lot of valid dissection that shows that. But the point I'm saying is, we become fibrotic with lack of movement or overuse. As an adult, if you're sitting in a chair for a long time, accountant working at your desk, yes, those muscles are going to lock down, because we have these cells called fibroblast cells that lay down collagen based on the lack of movement or the type of movement we do. And it's basically a spider laying down collagen, and that collagen, depending on how it's triggered, through mechanical transduction, through the mechanical stress, the stress is going to trigger this cellular reaction. It's going to lay it down in a format. If we're sedentary and we're in a certain posture, we're locked in, it's going to lay it down in a more like a felt-like format. Felt is all these fibers going in multiple directions, heated and glued together. That's felt. It's not flexible. Think of a carpeting, the back of a carpet, not flexible. When you really tug on that hard enough, where you have machines that it's going to rip. It's not going to be pliable. That's what happens when we don't move, or we do overuse. So we do things repetitively. That fascia is like felt, and sometimes in certain areas of our body, fascia gets like that. What we want to do is we want the fascia to be aligned like a lattice fence at a 55-degree angle. So the collagen fibers are aligned at a 55. That gives it its springiness, its athleticism, and to align the fascia, the collagen, in that 55-degree angle like a lattice fence, that's healthy fascia, and that's laid down based on the stresses we're putting on our body. We're applying or triggering this mechanical transduction to respond to that external loading, and bouncing movements, but loaded movements, multi-directional movements to trigger these fibroblast cells, these slugs that crawl around our body, millions of them every second, that are just literally casting webs of collagen, and then collagenase. We have cells that eat away collagen like Pac-Man. So you're turning over your fascia all the time, right? I mean, you have cells that are eating it away, right? And then you have cells that are laying down new collagen. And based on your activity or lack of activity, you're going to develop a matrix that's either going to be, dynamic and springy, or stiff and hard.
There's definitely a ton there, and a guy could spend his whole life studying that, and that would be an incredible work. But moving on to some of the other stuff you were talking about, improving the first 3 steps of acceleration. That seems to really increase athletic ability overall. So if you're improving acceleration, especially the first 3 steps, what are some things you're looking at to do to help young athletes get that jump?
Yeah. Well, first thing, that's everything. And it's really that 0 step that the research is talking about. Ken Clark talks a lot about tau and formula of, acceleration compared to maximum velocity, and that ratio, and knowing how to look at, your force velocity curves, not to go down that road because that gets really, really deep. But I think what we want to stay focused on here is to keep it simple. And, at the end of the day, I mean, that is about strength, right? The primary focus on that one is, being able to squat 2 times your body weight. But one of the best ways I feel to get after that now is velocity-based training devices, and really moving weight fast in the weight room, getting a base of strength, and, being able to squat 2 times your body weight. So Bill Kramer, we all know Bill Kramer. He's written 12 books. He's published, I don't know, hundreds of papers. I interviewed him for the book, and he was the one that really helped validate for me, and at least to kind of get somebody at that level, share that the 2 times body weight. And again, he didn't necessarily prove this through published research, but through his own research and my experience of 30 years, 2 times body weight. But then once you get to that level, and some athletes might be more than that, like if you have a really strong, wide receiver, defensive back, 180, 190, yeah, they're going to do 2.5 times their body weight. But you don't need you don't need your 250-pound linebacker doing 2.5 times body weight, right? I mean, if you have a linebacker at 230, yeah, if he's putting out like 460, 480 on the plane, good. You know what I mean? I mean, do we need to go like, 550? It's just not there, even at the high school level. But now we want to move that weight fast. And I think a lot of coaches are grasping that, and going in the weight room and getting in that weight room and working at that 1 meter per second, 0.8 meters, 1.2 meters per second, and then mixing it up, having your days where you're going to be at the 0.5 meters per second. But you're really working, between 0.5 meters and as fast as, 1.25 to even 1.5. And just, cycling through that, to me, not only in the squat, but the dead and different types of dead, really to get that first step. It's all about that first step. And if you master that, and then you come into those next steps, man, I feel that's a game changer. Now that's the foundation, right? Then I'm a big believer, and obviously, sled pulls, sled pushes. We have a device called the Ohm device. It's an isokinetic device, fairly inexpensive. It's only about $4,500 from Perform Better, and it's an isokinetic, so it's accommodating resistance, and it's amazing because we can set that at 4 miles per hour or 6 miles per hour, and just kind of progress and start with a real heavy overload, and then take off the resistance, or make it go, allow it to go faster over time. So just cycling through that strength game, and then hitting those key positions and understanding and acceleration. So to me, it's about being strong, but then being able to use that strength in a fast way with the right positions. And that's what we do. So, we get strong at the same, throughout the same training cycle. We're always, doing some type of speed work, speed technique, speed mechanics, and we're hitting positions, with aids, like an Ohm device or a sled pull, sled push. We're really honing those positions, overloading those positions, we call those anchor drills in our system. Anchor down the system and really, hit great key markers, right? Key position markers. And then from there, we're going to take away the anchors, and now we're going to go into application. And then, we'll lighten up the load and then go free sprints and then go games. So that's kind of our system. We keep it relatively simple, but the acceleration component is very interesting. The other piece I will add to that, and I think it's been overlooked, and I think Franz Bosch has done a great job in this, is really understanding and putting more emphasis on hip positioning and cross-extensor reflex and what he calls the hip lock, and really training athletes to understand that cross-extensor reflex. So if I'm kind of just walking down the street or walking in my house barefoot and I step on a tack, man, you're going to lift that leg up. You're going to flex that knee super fast, and the other leg is going to extend super fast. That's the cross-extensor reflex, and that's trainable. That is something that's really important, not just for acceleration, but overall speed, but really driving and enhancing and owning that cross-extensor reflex. So it's a combination of strength, it's a combination of key positions, motor learning, and to a degree acceleration, some elasticity, but not nearly as much elasticity as top speed would require. So acceleration is not really as much fascia related as, top end speed or multi-directional speed, but that's more fascia really. Acceleration is obviously more strength driven, but that's how we go about it. And I'm just saying not the new game to the market, but the relatively new game, the technology into the new game is the velocity-based training devices to enhance acceleration. I think is a game changer. It makes it fun, makes it exciting. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Evaluation equals motivation. Some of my nuggets that I've been using for years in terms of just motivating athletes. We know part of the challenge today, every day, is motivating athletes, right? I mean, your top 10 percenters are always going to be motivated. We don't have to motivate them. Your bottom 10%, they're never going to get motivated. It doesn't matter what we do. And then your middle 80%, that's the opportunity. That's what we get paid to do.
Yeah, and I've heard you talk about that before, and I kind of got the questions a little bit further back on that, but there's definitely some questions I wanted to get into. So motivating the young athlete, in their mind, they obviously want to be top performers, but they don't know how to get themselves there. So as a coach who sees a lot of athletes, how do you work in the motivation realm to help them achieve their dreams?
Yeah. Well, first, this is cliche, but you got to show them that you care, right? They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I know that's overplayed and people say that all the time, but caring is more with actions than words. And I think caring is simply showing that you're totally locked into the session. You're following up with them. You're building relationships with athletes. It's really fundamentals. It's blocking and tackling. It's relationship 101, right? I mean, when you really think about, just our society today, right? Just in general, like 50% of marriages end in divorce, and relationships, are just, there's so many things going on in the world right now. And it all comes down to trust. Everything comes down to trust. Building that trust with an athlete, and trust is doing what you said you're going to do when you said you're going to do it. And just following up with what you're supposed to be doing. And when you do that, and you do that enough, athletes are going to buy in, right? Because there's so many people that just talk so much smack, so much, and they're not real, and they don't really understand what this industry is about. Like, it's about empowering people. It's about, really motivating them and building their confidence or self-esteem, right? I mean, I think young athletes today, we have a self-esteem epidemic. Like that's the biggest epidemic on the planet. It's not the opioid epidemic, it's self-esteem. People go to opioids, people go to these drugs because they don't feel good about themselves. They need an external, element to make them feel better, right? Somebody with a high self-esteem and, typically is not going to go down that road, right? They're not going to, use alcohol as much or whatever, I mean, I'm not saying, don't drink. Everyone has to do what makes them happy. The point I want to make is that when you really understand what your mission is as a coach, and you really realize it's about building confidence and self-esteem, that's a game changer. And that's our mission at the Parisi Speed School. That's our product. And we understand this at a deep level. We define self-esteem as really two critical elements that lead to a third. The first element of self-esteem is a sense of belonging. When you look at, different cities around the country, certain cities like certain areas in California, there's a, 15% or high percentage of kids joining gangs, teenagers joining gangs, right? Why do kids join gangs? Well, they don't necessarily have a family, or they're not part of a team. They're looking for a sense of belonging. So the first the first element of self-esteem is having a sense of belonging and being a part of something bigger than yourself. So at our facilities, what we do, it's about, our Parisi, it's about a belonging. You're part of this locker room, part of this group, and it's for all kids. You might be a kid that doesn't even play sports. You're just trying to make the rec team. You're a 10-year-old that it feels awkward in gym class. You know what I'm saying? Like really low level kids to higher level kids. That kid's just as important, right? And so many coaches will dismiss those kids. That's fine. I'm not saying that's everybody's market. That's one of our markets, right? But giving that kid a sense of belonging, that's his locker room. Because when you think about sports, the locker room is one of the fun parts. It's like, what does Tom Brady miss the most? What are these guys? They miss the locker room. They miss the guys, right? So we want that environment, sense of belonging. The other thing is competency. When you improve a competency, you improve confidence. So the competency of speed or just movement skill literacy, feeling more comfortable within your skin, just having better posture, movement hygiene, knowing, feeling more confident in your acceleration because now you learned how to accelerate and push force back and not overstride. Feeling faster when you learn these things. That's a sense of enhanced competency that enhances confidence. And when you come to a training facility, sense that belonging, you're feeling like you're belonging, you're part of this something special, and you're improving competency, improving confidence, you have a higher self-worth. That's what we do for a living. That's what Parisi Speed School is about. So listen, I have 2 PhD psychologists on my payroll for 30 years. So, I spend a lot of money on really smart people, a lot smarter than me, and spend a lot of time and money traveling the world and just meeting with people and building relationships. People like Ken Clark, who's a PhD, became a very close friend. He came to my facility as a 16-year-old high school athlete. It's in the book. You probably read it. Now he's in his 40s and relationship with Ken. So it's this constant evolution. And, what I just shared, I didn't figure out in a day, right? Kind of how we package that and how we train our coaches to deliver that content in a way where we're building self-esteem. There's no more important product than improving a kid's self-esteem on the planet, right? Yeah, you might, you think you're getting your guy to run a 4.4 at the NFL Combine so he can make millions of dollars, and that's great. But there's only a couple hundred of those guys at best. Our mission is to change the world. We're looking to, we trained 1 million athletes. If we got 1 million people to feel more confident and more self-esteem, we're changing the world, right? That's what we do. We're changing the world. And that's, if more coaches kind of like buy into this concept, our industry will continue to grow and be more powerful.
Now, with what you're saying there, that jumped out at me. When my daughter was younger, she got a chance to work with Christy Ambrosi. Now, Christy Ambrosi, she played softball at UCLA and was on the women's softball team that won gold in Sydney. I didn't realize the amount of money that the U.S. Olympic team spends on psychologists, sports psychologists. Oh, yeah. So obviously there's a component there that is very valuable to the Olympic team, to these colleges, to these pro teams that people aren't totally aware of, and they all come back to the self-confidence of an athlete.
I got to tell you, man, I mean, if you can get your mind right and you understand flow, flow state, you can't get into flow unless you're confident and you've put the time in, and everything else slows down and you're just doing your thing. I talk a lot about that with my athletes, and you can't get there unless you have a coach that's getting you right. And as performance coaches, we have to be psychologists. We have to be sports psychologists to them. And as coaches out there, you got to study this stuff. You got to really dial it in. We need to be motivators. We need to be all these different things. And when you are that, and I can say from experience, we've built a good business, and there's a lot of coaches on board, and it's through not just the training science, it's really through the delivery. And what's interesting is, I bet, you could make a better hamburger than McDonald's, right? Like if you were going to have a barbecue, I don't think you would, you know, go to McDonald's and buy hamburgers, right? You'd probably be embarrassed if you had a barbecue and you went and served McDonald's hamburgers. That would be embarrassing. You would go to the butcher, or go to your supermarket, get some good patties, and put them on the grill and make a hamburger much better than McDonald's. And I say, well, I mean, you're much better than McDonald's. Why don't you compete against them? Open up a hamburger store, right? We that kind of think, well, that's true, but not really. Why? McDonald's, they don't have a great product. They have a great delivery system, and it's very consistent. Now, I'm not comparing what we do to McDonald's at all, but what I'm comparing to is that understanding the importance of that delivery. And it's not just content, but it's how that content is delivered is really magical, because you can have great content, and if your coach isn't engaging and isn't motivating and inspiring or connecting with the athlete, they're not going to get nearly as much out of it as if the athlete, was connected. Now, on the other contrary, if the content isn't great, and the coach is extremely connecting, well, that coach might get lucky if he's not doing too many crazy things, and he doesn't get the athlete injured. He might get some pretty good results. So, in that one, because if the athlete becomes disenchanted and is not working hard and not motivated, and you might have great content, you're not going to get great results. So it's really pairing the two. The motivated, highly fine-tuned, high-level athlete, they're few and far between. There's not many of them, highly motivated, highly talented, and every coach wants to train those guys. If that's your goal, just to train those guys, well, you're going to have a tough time making a living. If you're not that you can't do that, if you're an individual coach and that's what you do and you got your client base, good. But if you really want to grow and scale your business, it's a different animal. I have a lot of experience in that, and that's why our populations range from 7 years old all the way through, college professional. The majority of our athletes are 7 to 16. That's where it's needed, the most, I think.
I always felt like a person's program wasn't going to be evaluated on the freak athlete, because in a lot of situations, that freak's going to be a freak whether you were involved in their life or not. But coming back down, like you said, and finding, the average athlete that needs the help and bringing them up another level is where people can see your influence on what you're trying to do.
I got to tell you, that's exactly what we're about. Our goal is to make every athlete that comes through our door, help them have a successful, fulfilled high school career. And the guys that are really dialed, to help them play in college. And our system does that. We take below average kids and we make them really good high school athletes. And then those kids that are really dialed, I'll just use my sons, for example. Like, again, not great genetically, 5'10". I got one son playing Division III basketball, which was hard to do because he was a COVID year kid. Spots were hard to come by. And my younger guy's playing Division I football. And I'm not saying that to try to impress you, but impress upon you. And we have a lot of kids like that, that come in that are, just average, that have gone on to do really great things and have a great fulfilled high school career. And, when you really think about it, those high school memories, man, something about high school sports that's still, I think pure and really memorable, right? And that's the goal for us is to help all these kids really fulfill their high school careers. And then again, think about this. There's over 45 million youth athletes in the U.S., right? There's about 8 million that play high school sports, and there's about 1 million that play college sports. So let's think about those numbers. So 8 million and 45 million, you're cutting out like 75% right there. That's huge. And now you go from 8 million to about 1 million. Now you're cutting out like 80% again. So there's two massive, chops, right? And like we know what our mission is, and we know what we're about, and that can start as young as 8, 9 years old, helping athletes kind of move along and build that movement literacy, build that fascia awareness in their systems as young kids. Think about like the old timers say, when I was younger, I used to just go out and play. And play on the monkey bars and climb trees. They're training fascia. You know what I'm saying? That's fascia training. And, we've got into this thing in the weight room, and we have a lot more injuries. Now, we play in a lot more sports than we played in the past. But I think these kids aren't moving omnidirectional enough as they used to maybe 30, 40 years ago. And we're trying to bring that back.
Yeah, listening to you talk, that's essentially what it sounded like to me, is you're trying to recreate the 80s and 90s environment the kid lived in, but now you have to do it through a gym.
No doubt. Now there's real science behind that because of the ultrasound equipment is more advanced now over the last 10 years. The ultrasound equipment has become so advanced. We can look at this, this connective tissue system. We can diagnose, we can treat, we can, we have an incredible medical group in our facilities now called Alliance Orthopedics, where we have orthopedic doctors with ultrasound machines looking at injuries immediately and being able to, provide services same day and using ultrasound as guidance to whether it be injections or whatever that needs to be done, diagnostics. And we can look at fascia and see if the fascia is disrupted. So it's really, really amazing. And I'm fortunate to be aligned with such a great group of doctors and having this medical equipment right in our facility where we have our 24 full-time 8th graders. So we have a pretty cool lab at that sweet spot of 13, 14, 15 years old, because that's right in the heart of our sweet spot, those ages. They're developing athletes. And again, naturally, they're going to get bigger and stronger from their age standpoint. But when you teach them the right movement literacies at those ages, and they're able to take that now into high school, and every time they do conditioning, every time they're running, they're hitting, they're hitting the key landmarks with joint angles, and they kind of understand it enough to have a thought, like, train with a purpose. Even if they're doing conditioning, just having a purpose. Not to go down the road of Nick's book, Internal External Cueing, Nick Winkleman's book, and the tremendous book on internal external cueing. But I think there's a place for it all. Internal external cueing. I think there's a place to not think of anything using aqua bags as letting the tool be the teacher, and letting the body self-organize with external loads depending on where you place them. I'm a believer in all of it. I'm a believer there's a place for all these types of techniques of training. I'll never go down one road saying, internal cues are useless. They make no sense. I believe there's validity to at times, depending on what the athlete needs. Now, cues are like T-shirts. They stink after a while, to quote my friend Dan Path. So you got to continue to see where the limitation is and then help that athlete find that. But what I'm saying, when you give the athlete enough information, you don't overload them, right? But you bring them along. Now that athlete, his best coach is himself. He's able now to coach himself, and he's able to now, when he's out in his sport team and he's training with his sport coach, he's recalling some things he should be doing during conditioning or during, whatever they're doing, during the practice. Not during the game. You should be in a flow state during the game. And during certain skill work, you need to be in flow state when you're doing certain skills, not thinking about anything. So, but you got to get the reps in.
Now, I know our time's a little bit limited here, so I wanted to touch on one more thing. You got guys like Joey Garasio down at FAU, who's kind of revolutionizing de-acceleration training. You touch on that quite a bit in your book, in the de-acceleration work and how that carries over. What have you kind of found in there that makes that so important to you? Yeah,
20 years ago, we really did a deep dive. Martin Rooney was with us for 13 years. We went down that deceleration road, and we put out our deceleration training modalities back in like 03, 04, 05. Deceleration, the faster you decelerate, the faster you're going to, the quicker you're going to be, right? It's really understanding the importance of ligament and tendon strength, but really going down this road of understanding biotensegrity. And when you understand the body and the system as this biotensegrity or model that is a series of compression and tension, compression of the bones, you have these strong bones, wooden struts, for a lack of better words, if you think of it, held together with elastic bands, muscle, tendons, ligaments. when you have and that's integrity model where, the structure is stable, but also flexible. It's a stable but flexible structure that has the ability to absorb and release force, and the ability to absorb force in a way through our system, and by training that, understanding how to eccentrically load and load eccentrically in different ways. Not only in the weight room traditionally, at a certain rate, a slower rate to really build that tendon and ligament strength, but also eccentrically loading at speed, right? Whether it be with elastic bands and eccentrically loading, that element, and understanding joint angles and the depth of the angles, and just these force vectors, training in a way like that, you're training that suspension system. You're really focusing on developing that biointegrity model, that structure that's made of these compressive parts, the bones, and elastic parts, the fascia, tendons, and muscles, how they work together, how they're all tied together, and this system as a whole is absorbing force and then releasing it as a whole complete system. That's really the essence of deceleration, and understanding how to not just decelerate, but decelerate and using that deceleration to enhance your reacceleration. And that's understanding how to load the whole system, not just the one joint or the ankle or the knee, but the ankle, knee, hip, the spine, like really understanding how it all works together to exert force. And that brings us into this other analogy of mechanical composites, and ultimately how to create, this dynamic, spring loaded system, and how to really make it more adaptable in milliseconds. And we talk a lot about mechanical composites in terms of how the body, how to train to make your body a mechanical composite. In terms of that, some people, basically a mechanical composite, if I had a piece of pine wood, say a 1/2-inch piece of pine, and it was, just a typical, like a 1 foot across and, 2 feet high, and I held it in my hands, and the grain was going, laterally, like parallel to the ground, and someone was to punch it like a martial arts athlete. If you knew where the grain was and you kind of held it a certain way, it'd be easier to break the wood. But if I took that same piece of pine wood, 1/2-inch piece, and I sliced it into veneers like potato chips, and then I cross-glued it back together, now that would be plywood, and that's a lot harder to break. Same exact wood, but it's a lot stronger. That's a mechanical composite. And the body, when you look at the core, you look at the, transverse abdominis, rectus, internal, external obliques. They're layered on one another. And when you create this stiffness and this mechanical composite, and even the muscles that layer on one another throughout the system, the joint structures, when you decelerate and you're creating that stiffness, it's not just that eccentric strength, but it's that mechanical composite. It's that co-contraction of all these muscles that create that quote unquote plywood, that these muscles are laying on top of one another, all contracting at the same time, because the sum of the parts is greater than the individuals added up. If you add them all up together and they all work together as one, it's a lot stronger than just taking individual muscle strengths. Stu McGill has done this work in his lab, and you're a whole lot stronger. So taking that piece of pine wood, slicing it up and just repositioning it, it's a lot stronger. The body works the same way. And the body is going to respond to different elements. They've grown trees in greenhouses in Arizona at different Arizona State University, I think it was. And these trees would grow so much faster in these greenhouses, but they got to a certain height and they would fall down because there was no stress wood. There was no wind that would create stress wood within the tree. And that stress wood is a mechanical composite that the tree creates, that helps, give it more strength. So by practicing and facilitating these omnidirectional moves and doing these different actions, you're gonna be able to create greater strength and deceleration strength and pulsing stiffness. That's why I call this pulsing stiffness. Is how fast we can relax, not just how fast we can contract, and facilitating that. I know that's an earful. There's a lot there. Hopefully people can rewind that and listen to it again.
Now, I appreciate all the time you've taken, and you've been super generous answering all the questions. So I'll ask this one, and we'll kind of wrap up with this. But with as much experience as you have in speed development, youth athletes, fascia, everything we've discussed in this whole podcast, do you ever read something or listen to somebody talk and it just like takes you back? Like, holy cow, I never thought about it that way. Do you ever hear something that really changes your perception on what you've been doing?
That's a great question. I don't know. I don't know if I could say changes. I could say a lot of things I come across just gives me more clarity, right? I mean, so like velocity-based training, more clarity on why to lift fast and how to lift fast and how to manage it, right? So that's an example. Fascia, when Dan was talking about it and I did a deep dive, by diving in gave me more clarity. I'm talking to Cal Dietz and he's talking about his spring ankle model and how he does that and using ISOs is such a key element. Yeah, man, that, clarity. Okay, that makes sense. So not so much changes. It's, I would say almost kind of enhances, just constantly enhancing. It's some of these things I've done before and I've seen, but it just kind of, it's constantly, building out that puzzle. It's constantly evolving and it makes it fun and exciting. For me, it's like, yeah, man, this is cool. The body, it's like a doctor. It's trying to cure cancer. It's, you're going to work, you're trying to solve problems. You got to be a problem solver, trying to get to that holy grail of creating the unbreakable athlete and, just building greater injury resiliency, because that's really what it's all about, because the best ability is availability, so the most important thing is getting athletes to be injury resilient. And, the key element is really to, the never-ending pursuit of excellence. That's mastery, right? That's that mastery. That's that martial arts motto, is not that you're the black belt or the 5th degree black belt. It's the never-ending pursuit of mastery. It's the never-ending pursuit, but also staying grounded and not following the next fad or just going down the road where this is the holy grail. This is it. It's this one drill. This is everything. No. It's all based on the individual athlete. It's based on the athlete's training age, their needs, their sport, their specific skill, their weaknesses, their body types, their anatomical drivers. Are they more muscle bound? Are they more lean connective tissue bound? It's all these things, and it takes time. As a coach, it takes years to really be in this and train and logging in thousands of hours with athletes and seeing how these kids respond. And to me, the lower level athlete you train, I think the harder it is, to really get these kids to understand these motor skills. All my coaches cut their teeth training 7, 8, 9-year-olds. Like, if you're able to get those guys to move more efficiently, you're going to be a damn good coach.
There probably is a lot to that. I've heard Chris Corfus talk about that. He's seen more foot problems than elite level coaches because they don't see the athlete you're talking about. They only see elite. So by exposing yourself to that, you have to become a better coach.
Yeah. No, it's great, man. It's funny. I got my guy Rich Sadiv, who owns our Fairlawn facility now, our flagship. He came in. He was a UPS guy. He worked at UPS his whole career, and he started working with us back in the early 2000s, and was a power lifter guy. And he came in, started training younger kids, 8, 9-year-olds, and now he helped Mekhi Becton get back on the field, and he's trained dozens of guys at the NFL Combine running 4.3s. And he knows those Combine drills really well. He just logged, hundreds, thousands of hours. And, when you follow the fundamental principles of biomechanics and you really understand the physics behind it, and you just do it over and over again, you start developing your own cues. You start developing these nuances as a coach and knowing what works and knowing how athletes will respond to certain, cueing and whatnot. So it's just logging hours and being that never ending student is really, I think, the magic. And, there's no magic, and that's, fundamentals. There's no magic formula. There's no secret drill. There's no secret system. I mean, fascia, yeah, it's newly discovered. It's a newly discovered organ. It's considered a newly discovered organ, which is kind of cool. But understanding it, being a javelin thrower myself, I've been training my fascia system my whole life. I just never knew it. Robert Schleip, I'll say this one thing, I said it in the book, did an ultrasound on Thomas Roller's right pec, and Roller won the gold medal in the javelin in 2016. He's 290-foot, German javelin thrower. And he identified a 3 millimeter thick aponeurosis across his right pec and a 0.5 millimeter aponeurosis across his left pec. That's free energy. He basically has like an Achilles tendon going across his right pec, getting free energy to help launch that javelin. So understanding that now, like that's not just throwing javelin, it's throwing medicine balls. It's throwing, all different types of weighted objects that develop that free energy, that collagenous, non-living tissue that propels athleticism.
You laid down so much information in this whole podcast. I can't thank you enough. That you would take time and come on is definitely an honor. So I appreciate everything you've done, and hopefully one of these days we can catch back up.
Yeah, man. Honor to be here. If any coach is interested, check us out at parisischool.com. We have coaches courses, mentorships, affiliate programs to help coaches monetize their skill in this industry. And that's one thing I really pride myself on, giving coaches not only the science, but the business systems on how to monetize their skill. That's where I think this industry is lacking. There's a lot of good coaches out there, but they don't know how to monetize it and really in the private market. So we do that at a high level as well.
And I'll make sure in the bio at the bottom, I'll attach your website on there. That way it'll be a hyperlink. People can click on it and go check your guys' stuff out.
Awesome. Thank you, man. Thanks for having me. You're doing great work, brother, and a lot of good info you're putting out there. So this was awesome.
Well, thank you very much, Coach, and you have a wonderful evening.
You too.